Can we start?
Yeah.
Well, a big welcome to all of you here in the room and online. Delighted to have you here at this event on urban resilience, which is co-organised between UN Habitat, UNDRR and UNECE. So, I mean, just a few housekeeping rules before we continue. This meeting is in hybrid form and questions and answers are transmitted to the panellists as much as possible, and persons in the room can have the floor by raising their hand. I want to thank all colleagues who worked hard to organise this hybrid meeting. We're here hosted in the headquarters of the Geneva Cities Hub in the beautiful Villa Rigo, and my colleague and friend Camilla Vera is the co-director of Geneva Cities Hub. Is happy to host us here. And I'd like to also thank the team, Camilla and Pauline, who is helping with the logistics. So we have a rather packed agenda this afternoon, so I'm going to give a few brief words of introduction. We have some special speakers, but I think you're all very aware of the importance of urban resilience and why it's such an important topic for us at UN Habitat with the other partners. And of course, we all know that we already all live essentially in an urban world, but as we approach 2050, we're going to find at least 2/3 of the world's population living in an urban agglomeration of some kind. And the other interesting point to realise is, of course, that many of those urban settings have yet to be built. So we really have two issues in front of us. We have to look at the resilience of existing urban centres and see how we can improve the situation. And then we also have to give thought to the form and function of urban areas that are yet to be built. So it's incredibly important that we tackle this topic. So of course, urbanisation, you know, is a complex process, but of course, it has been stressed much more recently by issues such as climate change, conflict, and of course, more recently, the health pandemics that we are having to wear. We're assured by the epidemiologists that, you know, when this pandemic finishes, there's another one not too far away. So it's incredibly important that we focus our attention on these two aspects of urban resilience. So of course, urban resilience is a lot about the physical infrastructure and setting of urban areas, but it's as much about the governance and the individuals and the people and the fabric that make up those cities. And it's very important that we understand, we learn from the COVID experience and from other things, we learn about the particular resilience issues that we have to work on. Habitat, of course, has a range of tools that we're working on to support urban resilience, and you'll be hearing a little about some of those tools from my colleagues today. But of course, what we're aiming for in the longer term is a sort of package of urban resistance tools which go beyond risk reduction and humanitarian response efforts to look at multi-hazard and multi-stakeholder events. So I'm not going to say much more, ladies and gentlemen, other than to thank you again for joining this meeting, and we look forward to your contributions, both those of you who've made it to Villarigo and those who have kindly agreed to join us online. So with that, I will hand over to my second colleague from UNDRR, Octavian Vivol, who will give us some words of introduction.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, good afternoon. On behalf of the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, it's my pleasure to see so many participants and so many friends in this audience and on the virtual space. First, I would like to thank our partners, UN Habitat and UNECE, for co-hosting and organizing this event, and the Geneva Cities Hub for hosting us this wonderful viewer and organizing all the nice environment for our discussions. As my colleague already mentioned, the COVID-19 crisis was indeed and is still a stark reminder of the work ahead of us to build more resilient societies and cities. Today's risk landscape is indeed, as you can see, complex, involving cascading and systemic risks, the impacts of which do not know borders, and therefore it's everyone's business. Over the past 2 years, Europe has faced the impact of global pandemic, the growing severity of the climate crisis, and most recently, war and displacement. As we gather today, there is tremendous human suffering in Ukraine. Similarly to many disasters, local communities, mayors and governors are really on the front line. As we know, war and conflict directly exacerbate vulnerabilities to other disasters and contribute to the already significant challenges we face in terms of climate, food security, and poverty. Therefore, it's quite obvious, I think, for all of us that we must accelerate action and to accelerate building more resilient societies, communities. The cost of inaction is too high. And in this context, an integrated approach to disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation is required, and it must be put at the core of political, technically sustainable development and climate agendas, as well as the new urban agenda. We must turn our attention to support the cities, which, as I mentioned earlier, are the forefronts of the various crises that we face. In UNDRR, we are committed to redouble efforts to ensure the risk reduction plans and strategies at the regional, national, local levels are updated and fully implemented and financed. Therefore, the Making Cities Resilient 2030 initiative, which we are very pleased to support the Secretariat together with a number of partners also sitting around this table, such as UN Habitat, UNECE, but also other partners, is contributing to building local resilience. And a number of cities have already joined efforts to build resilience through peer learning, exchange, and capacity support. The MCR, or the Making Cities Resilient 2030, defines a clear three-step roadmap to guide cities to improve resilience and become more safe and sustainable cities, protecting progress towards the sustainable development goals. It gives me pleasure to see as panelists today our colleagues and friends from Matosinhos, from Potenza and Barcelona that are already actively contributing to the MCR 2030. Also colleagues from Utrecht and other municipalities that I know will be contributing to the panels that we hope will engage in this regional and global effort. And today the sessions will discuss in more details the objectives and the approaches of these various initiatives to build local resilience. I encourage all of you to really engage with the initiative, and I look forward to very rich and productive discussions today. And with this, I take the opportunity to thank you all for the long-standing collaboration and cooperation on this agenda within these partnerships. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Octavian. I'd now like to hand over to my dear friend and colleague, Lara Roll, who's the Regional Advisor on Forest, Urban Development, Housing and Land Management at our sister agency, UNECE, here in Geneva.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you very much to to Habitat, UNDRR for organizing this event. It's very important. And of course, special thanks to Geneva Cities Hub. Camilla is there. Thank you so much for hosting. I think it's a beautiful location. It's a bit outside of the UN, so we have a bit less of the maybe bureaucratic and political discussion, but really to have more of the content discussion, which is necessary. So thanks so much, Camilla, for doing that for us. So first of all, just to say that we at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe very much share the multi-stakeholder and multi-hazard approach that the UNDRR and UNHabitat are promoting. And also during the COVID pandemic, we stayed very closely together. I think the time we spent together also online was quite a lot. And I was just saying to Octavia that I saw you, but I saw you on Zoom. And this is the first meeting when we're actually meeting in person. So this is really a unique opportunity for us to reconnect and meet in person, because in-person meeting is very much different than any of the Zoom meetings, because this is where we can make many more commitments, develop many more ideas much faster and more efficiently. So thank you so much to everybody actually for attending this meeting and sharing your ideas. At UNECE, we are secretariat to the Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Management. So this is actually an intergovernmental body working with the national government. Today we have a Forum of Mayors, which is actually institutionally connected to the session of the Intergovernmental Committee. So also to say that as we are working very closely together with our UN agencies, with the sister agency, but also with other organizations such as Geneva Cities Hub and other partnerships and city networks through this pandemic period. We also really trying through the Forum of Mayors, which is taking place today and tomorrow, first of all, to bring spotlight to the cities, because this is you, the cities, who actually pulled through this pandemic. You know, all the implementation was on your shoulders. So you really deserve so much more spotlight, and whatever we can do through the Forum of Mayors arrangements to help you, to show what you are doing, you know, to bring it to attention to the national government, we will do. We are really your fans, your supporters, and we're really happy to continue working with you. And through the existing arrangement of the Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Management, we will also hope to foster the cooperation between city government, national government, and many other stakeholders. So with that, I think that there is already somebody speaking as well. So,
yes. Каким образом? Okay, so we'll go back to
under the building urban economic resilience. So for these 2 years, across the globe, economic development plans building back after the COVID-19 pandemics. So I hope some of the cities will also speak about that project. So we're working with cities. We also gained quite a lot of experience within this project. It's project bringing 5 UN regional commissions, UN Capital Development Fund, and UN Habitat, of course. And that project is working together with UNDRR through the Make It Cities Resilience platform. So we're really very well connected. We gained lots of experience, but what we see is that countries with economy in transition and countries in developing countries, they need more experience coming from more developed countries. So I'm very happy to see here Utrecht and other cities, Ghent and many other cities. So there is a lot to learn from your experience, also in countries like in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and further. And we are here really to help to facilitate this exchange, all of us. So thank you so much, and we're really looking forward to hear the discussion today at this event.
Thank you very much indeed, Gulnara. I'd now like to hand over to our moderator for the first session, Alexandra Hijazi, who's the Director of the Global Environment Policy Programme from the University of Chile. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you, the organizers, Cities Hub, to give a room also to the research community and the academia. We are very glad to be here. I'm Alexandra Hijazi with my colleagues at the University of Geneva and across academia. I see Spiro from Harvard. The issues that you all mentioned in terms of bringing experiences together is obviously of highest importance to the research community, and we're glad that we can take stock of your experiences. We heard the very inspiring presentation of the Mayor of Utrecht this morning, and taking stock also of what was discussed this morning, try to contribute to this build-up of methodologies to see what are the challenges, what are the achievements, and what are the opportunities in terms of moving ahead successfully through this transition towards resilience building. Without further ado, I just want to give the floor, because I know that it's been short, to the Mayor of Utrecht to share with us the experience and extend on what you shared earlier on in terms of your experience in building up resilience while taking place. There are two questions that are of interest to us. How cities integrate urban resilience to measures to respond to challenge of climate change, COVID, as well as COVID socio-economic impact, but also lessons learned from your experience in creating synergies towards Agenda 2030, few years left to the deadline. So let's see how Utrecht have been achieving and moving ahead.
Yes, well, thank you very much, first of all, of giving me the floor here and to be able to discuss with you. I think that what we are going to do now is on a little bit more of a strategic level than what you have seen this morning, where we were elaborating on how we do it on the floor. And on my way here, I was thinking, I'm not sure how many of you know Alanis Morissette. Yeah, you know, she has a song, it's called Ironic. It starts with the phrase, an old man turned 98, he won the lottery and died the next day. And I think that many of the climate activists were feeling a little bit like that when COVID started, because all of the attention was drawn away from their good cause and the change that had to be organized to the pandemic, right? But at the same time, if you look at the pandemic, what the lessons that we have been learning is that people actually need more health, they need more green spaces, they need more actually room to organize their lives in a way that they're not only working, that they're also, it's time for their children to be taken care of. So they need actually a better life. And I think that that has a lot to do with the climate agenda that we are organizing. And then the Ukraine crisis came. And again, many people would think, oh, this is a terrible crisis. But isn't it a distraction from the crisis that there is already on the climate issue? And again, I would say no, because in my city at this moment, we are discussing how to get rid of our dependency on Russian gas, for instance. So there is a clear necessity for changing the way of our energy consumption. So we need the transition in order to be more independent, to be more free, you would say. And that is why, at a strategic level, I would think that as mayors, we see that all these red lines are coming together in almost one agenda. And that is an agenda in where we benefit our inhabitants more on the way they use energy and also the price they pay. Because if they have better isolated houses, the prices for them will drop. So that is in their advantage that we would propose and push this energy transition. It is in the advantage of people that we have more green spaces, because if you have a lockdown, you're only allowed to stay at home and maybe walk for a little bit, then it's not so nice that you only have concrete to look at. Then you need the trees, you need the birds, you need all the surroundings, which is so beautiful. And especially at the third thing, the COVID pandemic also taught us that our health is vulnerable. And that we see that many people are poor, people have underlying diseases, mostly also related to education and poverty, are much more vulnerable in these kinds of pandemics. So in order to help them, we also need to build an agenda. And I think that I'm a lucky mayor actually, because I have a lot of people in my city who really are, I have to say, convinced that this is a good way. And not all of us have the same luck. But I think that if we would be able, as mayors, to make this story more strong and show what the benefits for ordinary people are, then we can put the climate discussion, which is much of the times more intellectual, highbrow discussion for many people far away from them. It's frightening them actually almost, because are they going to spend more on their energy bills? What does all this change means for their independence, their freedom of choice? So I think that if we would look at it more in a human way, and if we would take this inhabitant of us as the starting point of the discussion in the midst of all this crisis, which makes so many things more fluid and which changes people, their behavior and their idea about how the world has to be organized. And I would say it is a high opportunity, a chance to really push forward a new agenda. And I think that the problem for us at the moment is that there are not many people who dare to speak about it like this. And they should, because if leaders of today are not thinking about tomorrow, then they're not the right leaders, right? So yeah, that's actually my opinion.
Thank you very much. Even before, this input deserves a round of applause for itself, because it's very inspiring to capitalize very pragmatically on the improvements and achievements to reach out to the greater public with as a segue towards the Agenda 2030 and climate measures. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and the experience of Utrecht. I think it's going to be very interesting in the conclusions when we come back on synergies that we can build up. I want to give the floor a little bit earlier than expected to Potenza. I think the experience of Potenza is very interesting. Mr. Guerrero, it is indeed very much on our radars how to connect different stakeholders, and your experience as the president shows us also that there is an effort to be done in terms of connecting various communes and cities and towns that are involved in your policies. Thank you.
Mi dispiace. Sì.
Okay. Yes, sorry, President, we speak in Italian, but we provide for the translation in English.
Grazie, signor operatore, per la parola, grazie a tutti. Da molti anni la provincia di Potenza sta intervenendo nella prevenzione e mitigazione dei rischi e nell'inserimento delle relative politiche nei propri strumenti di pianificazione e sviluppo territoriale. Negli ultimi 20 anni sono stati investiti diversi milioni di euro sulle infrastrutture di propria competenza, ossia strade e scuole. La scelta di puntare sulla prevenzione deriva dai grandi disastri che abbiamo subito in passato, terremoti, inondazioni, alluvioni, mentre la strategia di intervento coniuga politiche ed azioni di sviluppo sostenibile, riduzione dei rischi e contrasto dei cambiamenti climatici. L'azione più di rilievo è quella di aver instaurato con i 100 comuni una condivisione di obiettivi, creando una rete permanente per lavorare con loro attraverso un processo multi-stakeholder e con il coinvolgimento delle comunità. Nonostante quanto fatto negli anni, il Covid-19 ha dimostrato che non eravamo completamente preparati a un disastro di tale portata. Prima di essere presidente della provincia sono sindaco di un piccolo comune, Albano di Lucania, che conta circa 1500 anime, dislocati su un territorio diffuso e montano, dove i collegamenti con i principali servizi sono assicurati dalla viabilità provinciale, cosiddetta viabilità minore. Nella provincia di Potenza 85 comuni su 100 hanno queste caratteristiche di città secondarie, mentre in Italia si contano più di 5.500 comuni sugli 8.000 totali in condizioni similari. Dopo 2 anni di emergenza che ha colpito quasi il 20% della popolazione, ora possiamo contare gli effetti reali della pandemia. Nelle primissime fasi la confusione era grande, la gestione dell'emergenza, sia dal punto di vista sanitario che logistico, è stato il problema principale. Il piano sanitario regionale non prevedeva numeri così grandi per la gestione di una siffatta crisi. Per far fronte alle difficoltà si richiedeva al territorio di fornire un'azione puntuale e continua, un'assistenza sanitaria di prossimità. Questo è l'impegno gravoso che noi sindaci siamo stati chiamati a fornire nella gestione della crisi da Covid-19. Tutti i sindaci sono stati aiutati da una forte azione di coordinamento fornita dalla provincia di Potenza, che ha assicurato loro l'assistenza continua per migliorare la circolarità delle informazioni e delle soluzioni da fornire ai cittadini. Ora che il programma di vaccinazione ha coperto circa l'85% dell'intera popolazione, possiamo davvero fare un elenco dei progressi che servono per aumentare la resilienza della comunità. I principali miglioramenti che necessitano riguardano il sistema sanitario, il sistema educativo e socioculturale, il sistema occupazionale e produttivo, l'uso delle risorse, l'ambiente, gli ecosistemi e la biodiversità, il sistema della governance degli enti locali. Nell'ambito del mio mandato di governo come Presidente della provincia di Potenza ho lanciato l'iniziativa Casa dei 100 Comuni come grande azione di collaborazione da fornire ai loro compiti, tra cui la riduzione del rischio di disastri e lo sviluppo sostenibile e resiliente. L'obiettivo principale è migliorare sempre più la sicurezza per creare nuove opportunità di crescita. Per dare maggiore impulso all'azione, la provincia di Potenza ha aderito con i suoi 100 comuni all'iniziativa delle Nazioni Unite MCR 2030 e vuole diventare hub di resilienza territoriale. Così un territorio marginale e complesso come il nostro potrà beneficiare di cooperazioni sempre più ampie che aumentino le opportunità di crescita condividendo esperienze e soluzioni operative. Quello che assicuriamo è un impegno ambizioso nel miglioramento della resilienza globale. Grazie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boyerino. The experience of Potenza is very interesting as a president of the province to show us that as much as for Utrecht, from different point of views, taking stock of achievements is also about the coordination dimension. Coordination is very important among stakeholders, the secondary cities, but also with across all systems. This is a system action that we need to be aware of, from education and health all the way to environmental systems. And this is again a testimony of how we can pull resources together across our achievements, and this is again one important element that we can bring into our community of practice. I want to give the floor to Ms. Salguero, the mayor of Matosinhos in Portugal. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the invitation and the chance and the opportunity to stay here with you and to meet you in person, which is particularly important in these days. And it's an honor for me and our team to stay here with you and to share our experience and to hear about yours also. So we come from a municipality, the city of Matosinhos, which is in a potential very high risk situation. An airport, a seaport, a fuel logistic park, several highways, and a cargo rail line bringing dozens of hazardous materials daily. Over the last few years, we have been building and structuring our capacity to prevent disaster risk and our commitment to resilience and at the most different levels, from mitigation to planning to response, with an increased financial investment and a growing and very significant technical support, which allowed us to be able to respond quickly, organized and competently to all challenges faced during the last years, particularly the pandemic crisis, as an integrated emergency management center, a formation of four permanent intervention teams, a creation of a fund to finance equipment and offer specialized training. In Portugal, the main level of response to COVID-19 was the local level. The response that really had direct impact on the communities resided in the municipalities. The fact that civil protection is very close to the various agents and entities that have had and continue to have intervention in this area allowed us to have a strong, fast articulation based on an adequate response, which ensured a management of the crisis, minimizing the negative impacts, mainly on the most vulnerable populations. This was really a transformative task in the activity and response of local authorities to a pandemic situation that we are not prepared to. But it was our preparation to respond and manage risks, disasters, and catastrophes, our social activity, and our strong connection with the community that allowed us to quickly focus our attention on that was really needed and articulate the interventions. In addition to these day-to-day concerns, for which we work with the 4 local fire departments to efficiently respond to the challenges of protecting people and goods, global concerns about climate change have risen in the last few years. Regarding climate change, the main risks that affect our territory are coastal overtopping and urban flooding. The effects of these risks are enhanced by extreme weather phenomena related to sea storms and heavy and concentrated rains, which are increasingly common. To respond to this vulnerability, civil protection has been working on the identification, monitoring, and assessment of these risks. This work has been developed over the last few years and in a multidisciplinary effort of municipal services, which currently allows us to have a georeferenced cartography of the mentioned risks with impact analysis that allow knowing the most vulnerable points, the exposed population, and having the risk and evacuation zones perfectly defined and providing information on where and how to act in the event of a serious alert or even confirmation of the risk. At this stage, our biggest challenge is to reinforce the culture of risk awareness and increase the capacity of the population to respond to the risk, continuing to implement a local resilience policy. This entire strategy is reflected in the plan to combat climate change and another forest defense plan. In addition, taking into account the decarbonization roadmap, Matosinhos also created the Action Plan for Sustainable Energy and Climate. The partnership with society entities and good global communication mechanism with which one resulted in a growth of trust in our institution by citizens. Stronger institutions promote a sense of greater security. And why is it so important? Because many of the risks that we have been facing in Matosinhos are no different scenarios from other medium and large cities. Matosinhos is and will remain very committed to resilience with the aim to working permanently to reduce the risk of catastrophes. And we are very committed to the MCR 2030 campaign of the United Nations. And for that, we are submitting a proposal to become a resilient hub. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mayor Salguero, to share with us your experience. Indeed, in this attempt to bring our experiences together, the question of mapping the new risks and vulnerabilities is extremely important, and also in bringing in the community. The question that you address, or the issues that you address in terms of agility and communication towards that agility of municipalities is extremely important. I definitely thank you, and we'll come back on within the conclusions on that issue. I just want to give the floor to the next speaker, and hearing from the representative of the city of Barcelona, head of resilience unit, Mr. Iris Gabas, to share with us some of your insights on resilience building from Barcelona.
Hello, good afternoon. And on behalf of the city of Barcelona, thank you very much for inviting us to join the panel. I think that both crises, COVID and climate change, they have common patterns in the way they impact, and the impact they have at the local level. And actually, I would say most of the risk do. And one is that the most vulnerable populations, so low-income population, the elderly, they are always the ones who suffer the consequences in a most severe way. And this is something that needs to be taken into account when planning and implementing response and recovery measures, especially to build back better and to enhance the resilience capacity of the city. And this is something that entails structural measures that are also in line with already identified vulnerabilities and the social rights policies and the implementation of the SDGs at the local level. And on the other hand, I think we must also bear in mind that resilience building needs to go hand in hand with environmental sustainability as well, and that we cannot think of them separately. And this means integrating long-term thinking, which is something that is sometimes complicated, and finding a balance between the urgent measures that may be needed to be put in place to resist the shock in the first place, but always bearing in mind not to compromise resources or a sustainable development. And in the case of Barcelona, for instance, talking about the COVID, the response measures and the recovery. One example of that was the tactical urbanism interventions in public space that took place also in other cities in Europe. So transforming the use of traffic or parking lanes to enlarge sidewalks to ensure the social distancing or to gain space for terraces as an economic recovery measure as well. And this was an opportunity, this crisis was turned into an opportunity for acceleration. So to test solutions that are the first step in a tactical way, to then implement more structural transformations in line with this, and that are now being planned in the city in order to move forward and consolidate this new model of mobility and urbanizations that reduces the use of cars and enhances more sustainable mobility on foot, bike lanes, and so on, and also gaining space for pedestrians and for new citizen use. And at the same time, enhancing and accommodating green infrastructure and all the environmental services that it provides, which is also something that enhances this resilient capacity of the city, and also is something that tackles climate change impacts by reducing also the risk of flooding or the impact of heat or high temperatures, which are one of the main risks related to climate change here in Barcelona, and all these actions that are critical to achieve both adaptation and mitigation goals and a healthier urban environment. So I think that this long-term thinking is something that needs to be taken into account when implementing, something that we need to bear in mind always when implementing immediate response for a certain shock, and also for when planning for recovery and for the recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you indeed for sharing your experience with us. Indeed, we have to be aware of all these low-hanging fruits that you mentioned, unpairing with fossil fuel in the case that you mentioned for Utrecht, but also for Barcelona, putting the emphasis on green infrastructure and soft mobility is also some of the easiest or low-hanging fruits that we have to take into account and capitalize on towards long-term improvements and achievements. I I want to give the floor to our last speaker, Esteban, City Resilience Global Program, UN Habitat. Esteban, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, I don't have a camera. It's not working. I've been trying to find myself for some minutes before we started. Well, I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. It's important. It's very important for UN Habitat, this event, because we've been working on this for many years now. We started working with disaster risk reduction issues from the very beginning, and it was very intensive during the first years of 2000. But then we also incursion into the humanitarian sphere of work, and that gave us even more of the feeling of importance of starting to work on resilience building. The reality is that that at the end of the day, the architecture of the humanitarian response is not adequate for responding to humanitarian issues in urban areas, and that's important. Because if we have any event in a city, as we can see it now, right now, it is very difficult to respond because we were not, we have no experience as a system, I'm talking. That prompted UN Habitat to start working and knowing that cities are growing and that the population is mainly urban. We are now an urban species. That prompted us to start working on trying to make sure that we prevent, but also advance our agendas to building resilience, to make sure that we can respond and recover from any kind of crisis. And that's how UN Habitat started working on this urban resilience program. And we decided to start going deep into the systems of a city, because until now, all this kind of work on crisis situations was very much a palliative. It was very much a response, an emergency response from one hand, and an analysis of the challenge from the other hand. The reality is that challenges are plenty. Cities confront many challenges, and local and national authorities are overwhelmed with all these challenges. What we need to do now is to start really acting into preventing and building that resilience. And we would like to also make sure that this doesn't stay only as a slogan of building resilience. What we want to make sure is that we have active participation from all stakeholders in a city, knowing that the challenges are not only climate change. Climate change is one of the, I mean, it's the main one for sure. But after leaving this pandemic, and now when we see this crisis, this war in Europe, we know that that you have plenty of crises, coming towards us. And if we don't start building the cities of the future, as Graham said, the futures that we have to build in future, but also start preventing in the cities that we have now, is going to become very complicated. And that was UN Habitat's response to all this. And well, we built a methodology which goes very deep into data information. We collect data and information. We produce a diagnostic of the status of a city, resilience in a city, and we provide actionable recommendations for them to start building resilience in the weakest parts of the city systems. We believe that we have to start building the resilience where we can have an influence, which are the city systems. The challenges, yes, we can have influences as well in some of them, but at the end of the day, they are more or less given. But the vulnerabilities in a city are the ones that we have and we must tackle. So that's the entire objective of UN Habitat. Being aware that we have more than 50,000 cities in the world, and that that we can't really support all of them clearly, it's important as well to create some mechanisms for replication. And I'm really happy to see here cities that come with their experiences, because based on these experiences is that we are going to be able to support other cities. We also welcome the Make Resilience campaign or Making Cities Resilience 2030, because it's a platform for all of us to interact on building resilience. And finally, I just want to mention that we are together with UNDP, we are working on a joint program to try to start upscaling operations and trying to reach out to more and more cities. This joint program will be launched soon during the high-level meeting here in New York, where we are organizing the high-level meeting for the review of the new urban agenda. I think it's important for all of us to work together in that direction and make sure that our cities are resilient to any kind of challenges. Thank you very much, and thanks to the participants as well, and everybody in the audience.
Thank you very much, Esteban. I just want to conclude on these elements that Esteban mentioned, the importance of these new methodologies. You mentioned the importance, obviously, of the system approach that we had heard previously, but also the importance of data. Data does matter, and the accuracy and the of interventions and agility of the system has a lot to do with the quality of data and how we pull data together. University of Geneva has been very delighted to be with UNECE and UN Habitat involved on the platform, setting up a platform, Resilient Cities platform, that also brings these elements to the common public. It's an open source, and these elements is very important also to build up the community. Open source data available to all and not only to the experts. Thank you very much. I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for carrying us through that first session. Without wasting any more time, since we're doing quite well for time, we'd like to move to the second panel this afternoon. I, at this point, like to introduce the moderator for this second session, Cassie Morris. If you'd like to come and join us here.
Just, yeah, please go ahead.
We have 4 panelists this afternoon. 3 of them are online, and 1 of them is here with us.
Okay.
So,
we can
over to
stay.
you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I received an invitation through UNDRR 2030, which I'm part of the coordinating committee for Latin America as founder of Youth Climate Leaders. And I'm also working at Climate Kick, which I think most of you know, that orchestrates action on tough challenges such as climate change and resilience. And we learn in this process and share with our community, which we invite you all to be part of. It's also great to hear over the last few hours about the experience of Utrecht. I moved to Netherlands about a month ago, so I can feel like how is live in cities that think in their people first and on the cars, like makes a huge difference. And during the pandemic, which I was in Portugal, which I also had shared this with you, I felt that biking was one of the main ways to navigate the city without being at risk. So I hope that this has made this kind of means of transportation more common. And I also congratulate the city of Potenza for their achievements and ambition to be a regional leader for urban resilience. And I agree that education is needed to achieve the city's potential. And finally, again, the Portuguese cities such as Matosinhos were a great example on how to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic because of their community ties. I really felt, and I'm glad that we could also exchange all of this together. I have one question for the whole panel, like you can also address together with your already what you want to talk, which is like, how do you think that addressing climate emergency in your cities will also help to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, through generating new jobs and prosperity in line with the green recovery? And to introduce our first panelist, Mr. Panos Mantiziaras, Director of the Foundation Braillard Architects here in Geneva. I also want to hear from you that how can cities be designed in a more innovative way to build a resilience to climate change? And perhaps if the recovery measures targeting the pandemic will also speed up some of this transition. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we put, I have sent a slide that we could project if possible. I had sent it to Micah before, is that right?
Okay, Micah is online.
Yeah, if Micah is online, she can sort of share it. Yeah, good, great, thank you. So what I'm gonna say today, can I stand up? Yeah, okay. It's actually to show you how we in the Braga Foundation, which is an architectural foundation in charge of a series of important projects here in Geneva. For example, the WIPO is a Braga building, the little tank shell in front of the UNHCR is also a Braga building, you know, the little pavilion. So buildings that have actually, marked Geneva in a period of fossil development, right? A fossil society, a fossil culture. So we're trying to get out of that, as you've very well understood, through the war problem. So what we want to show you is a comprehensive method for the ecological transition of cities that we entitled the Eco-Century Project, given that this century is either going to be ecological or it won't be at all. We won't make it till the end of it, right? So it's a project. It's not a reality yet. So we want to show how we're going to use cutting-edge data-based solutions and knowledge, how we are sensitive in stakeholder approaches, how we can be socially responsible, and finally, how we can give a system design approach. How? Let's take it clockwise. First of all, we spoke about cities having problems, having serious problems nowadays because of the climate. So cities are the real whistleblowers of emergency. This is a photo from this summer from Belgium. You can have the same photos with fires in the Mediterranean pourtour. Anywhere in the world, cities are going to be very quickly like that if we don't take very clear decisions, which means deciding, the second image, that cities won't look at all as they are now. There won't be big buildings. The whole system of actors, the whole system of professional designing and understanding the city will change, because we have to go from the modern city of the 20th century to a different kind of city of the 21st century, which will be low rise, will be very closely linked socially, will have local food systems. I would even say low tech, in fact. We are really challenging the high tech approach. There will probably be mapping of flood charming, but in the everyday life, if you want to be resilient, you have to have often low-tech approaches, because you won't make it. The systems will break. Think of the war. So the third image is very important, because that's actually the secret formula we're very happy to share with you today. If I can go, sorry. Here, Switzerland and the EU we're about 11 tons per person per year CO2 equivalent. You know that. And whatever we do, the best possible solutions in the cities will probably move us that way, up. We haven't found a way yet to go downwards in the total CO2 emissions of each person, globally. Of course, there are some good solutions, biking, for example, no meat eating, and so on and so forth, but globally, on average, we're very, very far from the results. So, I won't touch this. So which means that if either we imagine it's like being on the highway and having a lorry in front of you, you want to slow down. How are you going to slow down in front of a lorry that goes slow, goes like 20 kilometers an hour, and you are 120? Either you are crazy enough, you hear your kids say, you are Nicky Lauda, go fast, and you go that way, you accelerate, and last minute you sort of slow down, which may probably bring you to danger, or you are very radical, you are very conservative, you are very careful. So you say, okay, I'm going to slow down very quickly, which means that other cars behind you are going to follow you, because there's more people in the highway, there are more cars, more countries, more development happening. So the best thing you probably have to do is to slow down slowly in the beginning, and then understand the lorry's speed, and then slow down faster until you go down to a speed which makes sense, which you think you control the situation. So this is our next 30 years. We have to start by doing things slowly, and this means we have to start by creating projects that give us the possibility to measure which means checkpoints. We'll have to find ways to measure the slowing down of the system. This is new metrics of transition. You cannot make a transition unless you can measure it. This is where data comes in, where that Alexandra works with. Data is there in order to help us to have a monitoring of the slowing down, which is absolutely needed. So after the first 10 years, we'll know how to start, how do we work with the cities, what people accept, the acceptability, the technical approach, the technical feasibility, and then we go faster until we reach a point where the whole system is sort of understood and co-works together, and we are behind the lorry, which is 1 ton per year per person. We're very far from that, and whatever our cities do for the moment, it seems that we're not doing the right way. So what we're trying to do in the foundation is to organize a system of tools, which is of different sizes and different importance, different, I would say, complexity. The first one is the international consultations, which means that we bring together stakeholders and specialists from different countries, and they work together in a 2-year project with lots of interactions with scientific committees, with, I would say, almost a parliament kind of thing. The second tool is a transition workshop, which is actually happening now in Geneva. We've set it up, and we're inviting people to work together in local situations and learn, and then go back home and then continue their work at home with the local mayors and the local system. And the third one is, I would say, the Benjamin, the group, the newborn, which is actually a biohackathon, online, speedy, quick brainstorming around city problems that we only work online. So this is really long-term projects, this is medium projects, and this is speedy projects working in 3, 4, 5 days, depending on the size of the problem. So that way we can deliver action plans, especially with the big guy here that knows how to work with the system as a whole. Roadmaps and checkpoints, how do you do that? What exactly will be your trajectory in order to go from 10 or 12, Luxembourg is 16. We're working with Luxembourg now, it's 16 tons per person. It's much more than Geneva for reasons of fuel consumption. And of course, life, right? And finally, the most important for that mayors will probably understand better is pilot projects, like the case, of course, of Utrecht with the canal. This is a pilot project. It can be implemented, can be upscaled, it can be worked around different situations. So the 3 systems are worked within the Ecocentric project, and I'm happy to give you more information about that in the discussion. That's all.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being in time. Now we are going to hear from Ms. Melissa Fermanzel, which is the Climate Smart Cities Challenge at the UN Habitat in Nairobi, and she will join us online.
Can you stop sharing?
Can you hear? Is she,
Melissa, I think you're on mute.
yeah. Has to change. Maybe there's a.
Elena is running the show. I'm just additional. Yeah. Shall we pass to the speaker?
Hello. Melissa?
Hi, Melissa, can you hear us?
Yes, I can now. Apologies. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks, Graham, for inviting us here today. And I'm just going to talk really briefly about this idea of local urban resilience and some of the experiences that we've had in the innovation unit of UN Habitat in really providing some other examples and mechanisms for local communities and indeed local leaders to get new ideas about what resilience might be. And I think this is a really important question that I've picked up from listening to the mayors and the other speakers today is about how can we have new forms of creativity and innovation really to get new ideas around some of these very pressing challenges around climate in particular that cities are facing. And in particular, of course, one of the other sort of sub-themes of this question of resilience is around inclusion, and in terms of who in the cities is being included and who is not being included. And that's where I think, building on what my colleague Esteban said about the data, the importance of really building on the data and making use of the various partnerships that you find in cities. How do you creatively get some new ideas around that? And one of the approaches, and I think the other thing is there are definitely different approaches for different contexts and different settings. And I'm going to talk a little bit now about this challenge prize process that we've been running at UN Habitat. We recently have run a Climate Smart Cities Challenge. I'll actually get you to go on to the next slide, please. The next one, please. Yeah, so we've been running a Climate Smart Cities Challenge. We've now got 4 cities that are developing their ideas. And I think it's just really interesting. This is still a work in progress. But I think one of the things that's really interesting for us colleagues is that we find that the challenge prize process creates a dynamic momentum that perhaps injects a sense of creativity in a process and in a moment sometimes where people don't feel that there are any new ideas or any new partnerships or anything new that's coming to light. And because of the sort of combination of that capacity to open up for new ideas and use technology really through the challenge prize process, where you have a virtual platform where you can get many different people participating and bring together in a very dynamic sense a whole range of actors in the city. We found that a very useful process to get some new ideas, to get new partnerships, and even really to generate the sort of, as I said, momentum and interest from funders and from investors to participate in this climate challenge. And really what we've also found is very dynamic is that the challenge has moved beyond just a set of ideas into a support for some pilot projects. And this also becomes very powerful because it's one thing to get a whole set of ideas. It's another thing now to work with the various partners and particularly the local communities themselves to start testing the solutions. And this is where the challenge prize process becomes quite important to really translate it from a set of ideas into the action. And as I said, we're still going through this process of the challenge prize. But I just want to encourage this as a process that's really worth investigating, because it's a competition that takes a specific problem and incentivizes people to solve problem, because you'll have money that's being put into a pot and it helps engage the broadest possible type of community of innovators. And that's not just traditionally, say, from the tech sector, but from all sorts of broader backgrounds of people, which I think is very dynamic. And really these challenges start to act as a catalyst for transformative change because of the momentum that gets carried around them. And as I said, they come with a commitment of investments. And there is a growing potential to partner with cities to run these sort of challenges. And we found that by running them, that you develop a set of solutions for cities. You create a new ecosystem for collaborating, testing and building the capacity of innovative cities and developing a set of new partners. And really that process in itself starts to trigger larger systemic change. So I'll leave it at that, colleagues, for the moment, but just to say as one method in this moment to bring together innovation and digital technology to really reopen, I think, the field of participation and engagement of local communities, to give new momentum for both investors and city governments and local communities to come together. The city challenge process is a really dynamic one worth considering. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and now I'll pass the floor to Ms. Anna Bokompola, Director of the Urban Research Institute in Tirana, Albania. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for inviting me today in the panel. Usually when you invite civil society people, everybody expectation is that we start by giving a bunch of statistics, but I was happy to read in the agenda that it required today most of my thinking about the situation is a job, as I do not have responsibilities that the mayors have. Given the extraordinary COVID-19 circumstances, one could see no more clear than this, the interlinkages between people, environment, and prosperity. The COVID-19 crisis has exposed the vulnerabilities of our health and social system, as a country in general, as a city in special, for the whole economy. It has also highlighted in dramatic ways the need for better disaster preparation are shown. I'm not going to bring the findings of the studies done under the UNECE support from where I got the conclusions, but it's obvious with and with no survey at all that in Albania we need to be better prepared to withstand future pandemics or similar crises, including those related to climate change. And there is no trade-off between choosing a sustainable recovery and economic progress. What I can say with confidence is that at its core, COVID-19 is a result of the direct confrontation between natural systems and human systems. The remarkable economic growth experienced during the half-century has disrupted ecosystems through unplanned urbanization and expansion of human settlements at rates higher than population growth. But no need to be pessimistic here, please, because today the world, I think, is a better place than yesterday on many aspects due to the self-hygiene, always improving, improved hygiene and sanitation, education, etc. Cities now are coping with post-COVID crisis, but yet there is no plan to put resources in place to enable Tirana municipality or any other cities I know in Albania to help reduce carbon emissions. Although I don't know whether you know that we have clean energy. We produce energy mainly from water resources, and therefore we are among the smallest polluters in Europe. But despite all the other benefits, there are crises in place. So Tirana City is working to set an urban hub in response to the crisis and all its consequences, among other measures such as green recovery, smart transport to save fuel, etc. Now, cities the challenges that we face today in Tirana can be overcome by improving resource use and focusing on reducing poverty, but most of all improving environment as well. The future we want includes cities that offer opportunities for all and provide access to basic services for all people. I'm surprised from what I hear every day in the international conferences, discussions about the new world order. I wonder whether this is the brave new world that maybe billionaires would like to build. I totally refuse to believe it. And I think making people like their unescapable social destiny will not going to happen. Growth is inevitable and desirable, but destruction of community character is not. So we insist in building urban hubs in Tirana that can be one or many, but they will take the city's most vital buildings, serving as social spaces that enable participation. They hope to link different functions in our daily life, from work to climate education, recreation, private and public activities can be part of the mix. Tirana municipality wants to set the urban hub as one that holds a few environmental engineers and urban planners to the city that will meet everyday citizens, especially those who live in the rural areas where problems are as well challenging, but due to the long distance, they do not reach easily the city. This is a specific group that they have in mind. It may be even broader, might be more ambitious, may result in also in enlarged groups, but it will be a recipe for building as places where we live, work, meet, and exchange ideas that help with the climate change, help with the crises that come from us, not from the billionaires or oligarchs. And city has more options for development, where the leadership will take the citizens where they want and where they belong.
Thank you. Do you have any final comments? Because we need to go to the next and final speaker. Yeah, okay. And now we have Elena Monteiro from UNDRR 2030 Secretariat for Europe and Central Asia. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you, Cassia, and it's a pleasure to be here. Sorry, I have a bit of a sore throat, but those of you who are in the room have no idea what's going on in the chat, and it's amazing to see people from all over the world, from Zambia, from Philippines, from Lebanon, from Tunisia, from all over Africa. So we're very happy to see all of you connected. I'd like to start addressing the name of this session and why we're here talking about leaving no one behind when it comes to COVID-19 recovery, and especially climate change and urban resilience. And why is that? We know that climate-related disasters have almost doubled compared to the previous 20 years. This has exacerbated inequalities within and between countries, with those contributing least to global emissions often experiencing the worst impact of the climate emergency. So climate change, vulnerability, and inequality interact in a vicious cycle. Disadvantaged groups suffer disproportionately from the adverse effects of climate change, which diminishes their ability to reduce their exposure, reverse potential effects, cope and recover from climate and disaster impacts, resulting in even greater inequalities. And when we think about the urban environment, the realization of how exposed cities are to the simultaneous threats of multiple and cascading risks, this adds a new layer of responsibility and urgency to getting disaster risk governance right in urban settings. So prudent risk management requires preparation for a range of negative outcomes associated with varying degrees of warming, and to effectively manage unexpected concurrent threats. And we've seen that the pandemic has put even more pressure on this climate emergency, again, having a greater impact on disadvantaged groups. With that in mind, and building on the experience of the Making Cities Resilient campaign that ran for 10 years and engaged more than 4,300 cities, and reflecting the needs of local governments and voices of national governments, partners, and stakeholders, the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction launched last year the Making Cities Resilient 2030, a grand alliance of partners engaged in urban resilience, with an emphasis on moving cities from advocacy to implementation. This is the decade for action. MCR 2030 is a global coalition of organizations working with city resilience, among them our partners here at UN Habitat and UNECE, but also several other UN agencies, the World Bank, ICLEI, Resilient Cities Network, and many others. It is a convening space for cities and partners to learn and access resources. And its goal is to ensure that cities become inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable by 2030. With this initiative, we aim to leverage this knowledge and expertise of partners to support cities through this clear three-stage resilience roadmap. So from A, enhancing knowledge on risk and resilience, raising awareness, to B, improving assessments and strategic planning and helping cities to develop a resilience strategy, and C, moving toward implementation and taking action to strengthen resilience. For each of these stages, the initiative offered different tools and services for cities from this coalition of partners. So additionally, we work with national governments and National Association of Municipalities to strengthen ties with local authorities, forging strong partnerships at the local level that enhance the implementation process. MCR 2030 facilitates the access to tools, technical specialists, and advisors, and also links cities within a peer-to-peer learning environment and communities of practice. We're very honored to have Barcelona here as one of our resilience hubs, but also Potenza and Matosinhos, which are on their way to become hubs as well. Hubs are cities committed to sharing their expertise with peers and act as mentors in their journey. We have a very strong focus on implementation. Cities will have to address the underlying drivers of risk, which may include poverty, education, health, and environmental degradation, among others. More than anything, a holistic and system approach to resilience must be adopted by cities, leaving no one behind. MCR 2030 aims to provide a framework for that approach. So with that, and conscious of time, we're hard to keep the energy at the end of the session. I would like to make an invitation to all the mayors present at the forum today, tomorrow, but also to all those local governments listening online to join this global initiative, to start making use of these resources to build their strength with an inclusive and holistic approach. Have a look at our website, see how this initiative can benefit your city, and join us. The same invitation comes to partners, to the university, to other international organizations that are doing great work in resilience. Let's join forces. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cassie.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Cassie, for carrying us through that second session. Thank you to all of our panelists for the excellent interventions. We're doing not badly for time, and we now have an opportunity for you here in the audience to ask questions. We have been having many questions, I know, coming online. It's a bit difficult for us to synthesize them, but we will make every effort to get back to you and to answer the questions and to share them with this network. But can I ask if there's anybody in the room who would like to ask any of our panelists any questions? Please, madam. Please say where you're from and your job.
My name is Julie Olsen. I'm the lead author of the Housing 2030 report. And I'm trying to talk louder because I know that it's the wrong way away. What's on the screen. One of the elephants in the room, of course, affecting the room is also around the financial changes that have been done. It's one of the things we haven't really talked about, and we haven't also talked about the sort of labour work done either. So there are two financial relationships, if you like, that affect our resilience. Everybody knows in Europe that during COVID, housing prices went through the roof, even though incomes went through the floor. So we need to address that dimension, I think, in terms of resilience. One of the things that many academics have been talking about is the problems of financialization. And that means the role of finance in our daily lives, and when it can take over our daily lives and we become too indebted, we can't afford that home, we can't even afford children. So one of the things that we've been working on as a continuation of Housing 2020 is a podcast series which is called Tools to Tame Financialisation. It tries to look at all the different aspects that city governments, central banks, financial regulators can also take a role in containing these things, because financial vulnerability is also something which affects households and their resilience. Indebtedness can be really, really weakening for people who are relatively poor or having situation. So I wanted to ask the speakers, where does this relationship fit in to looking at resilience? Will it be something that we tackled as well?
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there's anybody who, any of our panelists would like to respond to that question on financing?
Perhaps the podcast series would be a help. The first episode's out, it's on the
Yes, please.
Stephen, I'm not an economist, so I will certainly be mistaken, fully mistaken. Thank you for this question. It's very important because it sets the question of place of occupying space. I mean, financial, real estate is about making money out of occupying space. It's as blunt as that. It has been so much, that's so for thousands of years. Chateaufroid, and place forte, it's because you are here in this place where you are, it's because it's worth something and you defend it from the others. This is what we see today in Ukraine, right? So financialization is a globalization of the question of occupying and holding and owning space. It's about ownership. And I think the question is extremely complex. It has to do with the capacity of governments and stakeholders and public stakeholders to share the debts, share the cost of housing, share who pays for whom and how much and when. We've been victims for at least 150 years of this real estate growth, which made cities possible. Cities are a result of real estate, unfortunately. And this, if we want to change that, I mean, people have tried to change that in history, as you know, badly, very badly, and we'll have to try again and again. But controlling real estate hyper profits today in the world will probably be the first thing to do overall, globally. That's my thing.
Thanks, Thomas. Anybody else, or is there anyone online who would like to answer the question on financing? No, I don't think so. Are there any other questions you'd like to put to our panelists? Anybody else in the room?
Credo che sulla resilienza bisogna istituire un fondo sovrano.
We speak regarding local governments. So local governments must to provide for a resilience fund in their budget.
Che vada a ridurre i costi di intervento quando noi abbiamo dei disastri e quindi man mano ridurre attraverso la prevenzione anche i disastri, lavorando sul tessuto urbano che già è presente, quindi evitando di occupare altri spazi, ma lavorando sulla prevenzione del tessuto urbano che abbiamo e questo fondo farlo crescere gradualmente in modo tale che diventi un fondo ordinario.
Yes, if we produce this, is a sort of financing or resilience financing among all the program activity that local governments has actually in their government mandate. So if you provide for this fund for prevention, you invest also for the subtlety, the resilience for the future, for the new construction. So you must think about using the urban structure as a existing tool, and if you provide for money for maintenance and prevention, risk prevention, you will also invest on risk mitigation and to reducing risk for the future.
Thank you very much. Please.
Just a word to comment the question. I believe that it's also a question of European level, not only the country level, but Europe has given a strong answer about the COVID crisis, and all of the countries have now a resilient plan. And in that plan, as my colleague panelist just said, we must make choices and to make the housing policy in the first place, and no one can be left behind, as is the theme of our meeting here. So you need to do to move a policy that can make lower prices for houses, and if anyone wants to rent a house in a big city, national governments must spend money in order to achieve that goal. So it's a multi-level decision. First, European decision that have already been made. Now it's the time for national governments to say how are they looking at that, and I believe that most, the biggest part of the countries are all unanimously saying that housing is a big problem for next time. So if we want to go further after the COVID crisis and now the war crisis, and if we all agree that housing must be in the first level of our worries, I believe that the real estate, on one side, because we can provide law answers, but also building many houses and supporting the prices of that with national and European money, we will be able to achieve that goal, I believe.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid, as much as this marvellous conversation will probably continue, that we really do have to come to a conclusion and make our way back to the Forum of Mayors. But I'm going to take 2 minutes, if you'll bear with me, just to share some of my takeaways from this afternoon, which has been a very rich discussion. And thank you to all of the panelists and to our 2 moderators. I think I've just got a few points here which I picked up. And this was really, my first point is driven a lot by what our dear mayor from Utrecht was saying, is that, you know, there is a huge similarity between what's happening with COVID, climate, and the conflicts, the induced migration, and the resilience needed. And really, these things are all so interlinked. We can't look at one in isolation, and what we do for one helps the other. So it's incredibly important, and we must focus the attention on dealing with the most vulnerable. The second point I took away was that it's very important that we don't forget secondary cities. And this was mentioned by a few of the panelists, but of course, the majority of people, particularly in the new urban world, as we get to 2050, are going to live in secondary urban centres. So we mustn't forget that secondary urban centres are important. We also heard that, I think from 2 speakers who mentioned the fact that it's very important that the city links to regional and national government in organising themselves. And this was a point mentioned by our colleagues from Italy, but several other people mentioned it as well. There's a call, of course, for multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder approaches. And a lot of this resilience is not just about one sector, it's about looking at everything in an integrated manner. There was also a call from many of the cities and experts to really consider the capacity to monitor, and how a lot of the tools that have been developed need to go deeper and to start to look at multi-risk assessment and linking the risks with existing determinants of poverty, poverty and health and other issues. There was also a mention of the need to consider environmental sustainability and the harmony between the natural environment and the human systems, and the One Health approach is very, very important. The tools and approaches also will greatly benefit from an increased sharing of experiences and mentoring between cities, which is something that many of you also talked about. We also heard that there are some opportunities for innovation. We heard about the pilot projects from Bayard Associates and my colleague Melissa about the use of challenge funds. There's a new way that can bring additional resources into some of these areas that are traditionally very difficult to get funding for. And my final comment really is, and this was discussed a little bit towards the end, was the issue of financing. And this is still an unanswered question that we really have to, as always, give our attention to. So that was my quick takeaways. Apologies for things that I missed. But before you leave us and we go back to the Forum of Mayors, I would just like to say a big thank you to all who helped organise this, to my dear colleagues at the Cities Hub here, to the two, what do you call it, the two moderators, Cassie and Alexandra, and to all those in the background who helped, and particularly Helena from UNDRR, from Pauline from here at the Cities Hub, and my dear colleague Mikey, who sat there in the way, who had made a lot of the effort to pull this event together. So thank you for all of you for taking the time out, and I wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you.